Professor Anthony Turton from the University of the Free State Centre for Environmental Management joins me now to discuss this along with the measures put in place by government to deal with these issues. Good evening, Professor Turton. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. I'm speaking to you after having seen a post on social media by yourself explaining your views on what's taken place over the past couple of days. And I want to get your views on some of the issues that you point out in that post. A lot of leadership has in the past day said that, you know, they had no idea, there was no warning, that's why the deployment has taken so long, why the response has perhaps been wanting. Yet you speak of very clear warning signs. How were you able to discern that there was trouble brewing, yet our leaders weren't?
Well, yes, with the benefit of the 2020 vision of hindsight, one can always be correct. However, looking back at the track record up until now, there's been a clear trail of evidence suggesting that this is coming. And I'll go to the immediate past, as in the last weekend before the Monday morning of violence. There were posters that were doing the rounds. In fact, I put one on my Facebook page that I'd received, and there were a lot of voice notes that were very precise, that on Monday morning this is going to happen, and it was very precise about white businesses were to be targeted. The whole thing was couched in very inflammatory racial rhetoric, blaming white monopoly capital and instructing a mass uprising against white monopoly capital. So that came out the weekend before the rioting. But the build-up to that before, months in advance, in fact, even years in advance, there's been a systematic looting of trucks. I live in the Port Shepstone area, and I've reported on trucks that are regularly looted as they come through the logistical routes on their way to the different supermarkets. I recently posted on my Facebook page a video that somebody took of a truck full of baked beans that had been looted in the full presence of the police. The police were standing there. They were seen on the video and not doing anything. So the looting of trucks also goes back to the xenophobic violence. You'll recall along the N3 highway, there's been outbreaks of trucking violence for a long time. And in fact, you speak to anybody in the trucking industry, and they will tell you that they've even established a very, very sophisticated network of almost intelligence flow of information about where the hotspots are, because trucking has been attacked for a long period of time. So there's certainly, from an intelligence perspective, I'm a former intelligence officer, so I'm familiar with the processes and the procedures involved. It's very, very easy to actually draw a trajectory through this and to start projecting into the future that this type of thing is increasingly likely. Of course, it's difficult to pinpoint it down to a specific day, but with those posts that came out this last weekend, then it was quite possible to come out as a threat. And I called it at that point in time in public, I called it a credible threat. As many people told me it was not credible. I believe that from a national security perspective, you always deem a threat to be credible unless it's proven otherwise. So that was my default position, and I took the public position at that point in time. In fact, over the weekend, I took the public position that there's going to be a revolutionary uprising on Monday.
Very glaringly obvious over the weekend and on Monday was the absence of leadership in terms of SAPS. We did not see the man in the hat, as you refer to him, on TV. He's usually quite visibly present. We do many interviews with Police Minister Bheki Cele on a regular basis. However, we didn't see him on the weekend. We didn't have interviews with him on Monday. We did see him out and about today, though. Why do you think there was this period of time where he was completely absent from coverage of events? He didn't speak out at all about what was going on and how it was being tackled?
Well, I'm not being unnecessarily critical. I'm being purely an analytical person. I'm looking at the facts before me. And the facts before me are that for at least a 48-hour period, government was entirely invisible. And I would go even further than that and saying, based on personal empirical evidence, seeing it with my own eyes, the government has left a vacuum, certainly in the parts of KZN that I've got personal access to. I live in KZN. And certainly there's been a complete, absolute vacuum of government, to the extent that we've now seen local militia that have been established spontaneously, and they fill the vacuum left by the state. Having said that, I noticed that today the SANDF has in fact deployed, and I also note that where the police have been allowed to continue, they've done an exceptionally good job. And there is, in fact, one incident where the local police ran out of ammunition, and one of these private initiatives supplied ammunition to the police, and that speaks to a supply chain management, planning, anticipation, intelligence-led intervention beforehand. So I think these are all lessons that should be learned, and I don't think we must be too harsh on ourselves in terms of apportioning blame. That can happen a long time in the future. I think right now we have to just understand that mistakes were made. But in the meantime, we've got a pressing problem that we need to deal with, and we need cool, calm heads to come together and to actually plot a way forward, because there's at least 4 or 5 critical things that I think are happening in the near-term future that require immediate, clear thinking in terms of planning.
What are those 3 or 4 things, or 4 or 5 things?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. I'm an abstract thinker. I'm a strategic person, and so I think in the strategic realm. And the first thing that I see is that the immediate short-term food shortages, without any question of doubt. My personal household, I have bread and milk for tomorrow, and then I have no more food in my household. But I'm just speaking on behalf of a community. The whole community is pretty much in that. So short-term food shortages are a serious problem. Diesel, fuel in general. The fuel has run out here in KZN in large parts, and the Natref refinery has been forced to declare force majeure because they can't get critical elements of their production process. So you're going to see a fuel shortage, increasingly expanding, which leads to the third thing, and that is this has been about supply chain breakdown, a fundamental supply chain breakdown, which is going to take months, if not years, to repair. So spare parts for machinery, medication, people on chronic medication. I know of people that have got medication, chronic medication, for the next 4 or 5 days. Then they're going to run out. Then they're going to possibly need hospitalization. Okay. Then, of course, we get to another critical issue because the point of payment machines have been trashed within the supermarkets. Even if they could get restocked tomorrow, they can't transact because they can't accept card money. So cash is going to start running dry because your ATMs have been so severely vandalized. So these are the immediate problems that I see that are going to require significant attention. And then, of course, the final thing is that what we've actually had is a super spreader event. People have lost all sense of social distancing. There's been a violent engagement between people. So I would predict that in the next 10 days, you're going to start seeing a spike in corona cases. And of course, the tragic thing about this event has been that places like Clicks and Dis-Chem and those sort of commercial stores that have been so successful in rolling out the coronavirus vaccine are no longer going to be able to do that in the immediate short term. I've had my first jab in a Click store, and I can't go back to for the second one because I don't know when it's going to happen. So I think that's the whole coronavirus is going to be exacerbated. We'll see that in the next 10 days. And from a planning perspective, I think that should be anticipated.
Professor Turton, we're running out of time, but I do have to ask you before we let you go. You raised the issue of the emergence of the invigorated moderate middle. You say the time of the incompetent ruling elite is nearly over. What are you predicting politically in terms of our social makeup and our political makeup in South Africa?
Yes, I think for too long we haven't had a moderate middle, and we've had this narrative that's been driven by a liberation movement that, with due respect, has not really been successful in transforming itself into a party of government. So I think that those days are over. I see at a minimum quite a significant crisis of confidence within the ANC. There's actually 2 ANCs. So which ANC are we talking about now? Is it the law-abiding ANC, the rule of law ANC, or is it the one that's simply a criminal syndicate looting the coffers of state that's now been reflected down at grassroots level? So I see a serious crisis within the ANC. And ultimately, the ANC is at a binary choice crossroad, as far as I'm concerned. They either have to make a decision that they go the rule of law route, which means they have to start prosecuting internally people that are guilty of gross crimes and misappropriation of funds, in which case they emerge invigorated, or on the other hand, they don't do that, and then they're going to lose the moral high ground, they're going to lose legitimacy, which then is going to give rise to this new emerging moderate middle that is free of the vestiges of the past and united across race, color, class lines, etc., but united by a common vision of what it means to be South African under current circumstances in a damaged economy, high levels of joblessness, 75% of youth unemployed, a lack of foreign direct investment into the country. Is capital a problem, or is capital part of the solution? All of these really complicated issues that have to be dealt with by this emerging moderate middle. So I think that we're going to see that happening, and I'm very optimistic that there's actually a good thing that's taking place in the midst of all of this carnage.
Well, thank you very much for your insights. That was Professor Anthony Turton from the Centre for Environmental Management at the University of the Free State.